I just will reiterate that we are recording it and it will be on the AFTR website to watch at a later date or share it with a colleague that couldn't make this morning's session or this afternoon. So I just want to say, guys, AFTR is really proud to have partnered with Paul to deliver this amazing 4-week guided challenge for you all. Having spoken to Paul and understanding the science behind it, I truly believe that you will find this life-changing and really impactful and really help you at this present time with all the challenge that we're facing. My husband and I are signed up, as well as many of the members of the AFTR team, and we are super excited to get started. And we're in really good hands with Paul. So I'm going to hand it over to Paul. He's going to give us a bit of a background because I can't sell you like you sell yourself, Paul. You have just got an incredible repertoire and palmares.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. And so, guys, just a little bit of intro on me. My background's pretty eclectic. I'm ex-British Armed Forces and spent 8 years flying in helicopters, hunting submarines, then did helicopter search and rescue, and went through combat survival and resistance to interrogation training in the forces, which is where I first got interested in the whole stress and resilience piece. Since I've left the forces, I've become a bit of a geek. So I'm now a neuroscientist, an exercise physiologist, and a nutritionist. And I'm currently doing a PhD in applied psychology, where I'm investigating and testing resilience strategies with the Australian Defence Science Technology Group. So it's a little bit of a mouthful, but I would call myself a pracademic when it comes to stress and resilience. So having had that practical experience of living and operating in high pressure environments where one person screws up and 4 people are dead, to now being a bit of an academic. But what I like to do is take the academic research and make it real, and talk about things that people can do on a daily basis. And this is what this is all about. There's going to be a little bit of background, and then we're going to get into the stuff that we can do and tie it all into the app, so as you see how this stuff actually works, right? So I'm just going to kick off with the webinar. And the first thing I want to say is just welcome to the COVID-19 shit show, because there's no point in sugarcoating it. It is a bit of a shit show, and it's been pretty catastrophic for a number of different industries, and worse in some places than others. But your industry and my industry have been particularly hard hit. So the travel industry, but also I'm a corporate speaker involved with that, and I speak at a lot of conferences, and that industry has been decimated as well. And there are other ones, particularly depending on where you live. If you live where I am and are about to do another 7 weeks of pretty hard lockdown, and it's pretty shit. Let's be honest. Let's not sugarcoat it. So let's just talk about a little bit more background around the mental health side of things. So we know that 1 in 5 Australians, 20%, experience a mental illness in any given year, and lifetime prevalence is around just under 50%. So that means almost half of people will experience a mental illness at some stage in their life. And we now know that 3/4 of Australians have reported that their mental health has worsened during COVID-19, and this is not going to get any better in Victoria. I think with this latest one, it's just going to tip a lot of people over the edge. Now, we also know that primary prevention and giving people lifestyle education and before they get a serious issue is more effective, it's cheaper, and it's less painful. Yet we only spend 1.5% of all healthcare spending is on prevention. So this app is very much in the prevention, but also resolution thing. So rather than waiting until people, if we think about a traffic light system, rather than waiting till they're red and they're completely in a very, very bad place, this is really the greens and the ambers, and ambers going to red, where what I'm going to talk about is really quite useful. And so the other backdrop that we need to consider is this. This is really what our genome is wired for. And one of my favorite research quotes in any journal I've ever read was from the Journal of Applied Physiology in 2012 by a neuroscientist called Frank Booth, professor of neuroscience. And he said in his research paper, and he's talking about the human genome. And he said the current human genome has not changed in over 45,000 years. He said the current genome requires and expects us to be highly physically active for normal functioning. I'm going to talk about that later on. But he also talked about the stress response system. And there's two parts to our stress response system. The first is called our fight or flight system. That's really about 3 minutes of screaming terror on the African savannah when you're being chased by a lion, as your ancestors. And then the second part of that stress response system is called the HPA axis. And that involves the hormone cortisol, which a lot of people will have heard of, right? And so the key thing is that we have evolved over 2 million years, our stress response system, in response to certain challenges, like the 3 minutes of screaming terror. And then the cortisol system is more for long-term challenges, such as famine, right? That's what it's designed for. But now with our crazy busy lifestyles, and then you throw COVID into it, really it's switching on what are supposed to be emergency systems for long periods of time. And when that happens, bad juju happens for our physical and our mental health, right? And so what we know is that because of stress, it affects certain brain regions. So the amygdala, this part deep in your brain, is the part of your brain that senses and responds to stress, right? And the neuroscientist Antonio Damasio showed in his lab that when your amygdala becomes sufficiently activated, when it senses something is stressful enough, it secretes out chemicals that can block your rational thoughts, and it actually shuts down your frontal lobes, right? The rational thinking, planning, judgment part of your brain. And basically your amygdala says, talk to the hand, I'm in control of this brain, right? Damasio called this amygdala hijack. We all know it as losing our shit, right? And you may have noticed that you're losing your shit a little bit more in the last number of months. And that's just because of the consistent stress and how it sensitizes our amygdala. So there were a number of really beautiful studies done recently looking at people who were exposed to long-term stress in the workplace, right? And they give us insights into what's happening right now. And what they found, and they followed a number of people over the period of 6 months to a year, and asked them about the stress levels in their life, some of whom were experiencing a lot of workplace stress, some of whom weren't. And they could see in the people who were experiencing a lot of workplace stress that there were significant brain changes happening. So both structural and functional. So there was shrinking of the prefrontal cortex and growing, increased size and sensitivity of the amygdala. What that means is that their brains were becoming more prone to stress. They were becoming affected by stress and actually more sensitive to it, right? So their arousal systems, their stress arousal systems were becoming more tuned to it, right? This also meant with these changes in the brain that people are less able to regulate their emotions. They're less able to plan, have good judgment, all of that sort of stuff. Now, it is exactly the same changes that we see whenever people become depressed and anxious. Those changes are exactly the same. And this is why we're seeing that very strong link between stress and depression and anxiety. So that's just a little bit of understanding about what's happening and how persistent stress is really very, very bad for our brains. Now, the other thing that's really important to know about stress is that uncertainty will amplify any stressor. So it's really the uncertainty around COVID that makes it so much worse. Like, nobody knows how long this shit's going to go on for. Nobody knows if we're actually going to get a safe and effective vaccine and if enough people are going to use it. Nobody knows what next year looks like, really. And so that level of uncertainty, whether we're going back out into lockdown, all of this stuff, it really messes with people's brains, because the human brain is a prediction machine. It likes to have certainty. So that's really important to understand about COVID and why this is so particular. Now, when this whole thing happened, and initially the first lockdown happened end of Feb, start of March, really, pretty much like you guys, I'm sure, I saw in a period of a week my whole business that I've worked for so long just kind of crumbling around me, right? And every booking that I'd had for the rest of the year, it was a busy year, was just cancelled within a week. And I'm sure with the travel industry, you guys just saw everything just get obliterated. And so, you know, there's that bit of shock when it's all happening. There's a little bit of disbelief, and then there's the, oh, woe is me type thing. That is absolutely normal for that to happen. And very quickly, I remembered about this guy, Jim Stockdale, who's a particular hero of mine. He was a fighter pilot in the US Navy, and he was in the Vietnam War, and he was shot down quite early in the war. And he ended up being captured by the Viet Cong and put in a prisoner of war camp called the Hanoi Hilton. That's what they nicknamed it. And it was an ironic nickname because it was the most horrendous prison camp in the Vietnam War. And Stockdale spent 8 years in that prisoner of war camp. 4 of those years were in solitary confinement, which is the worst thing that you can do to a human being. And Stockdale, not only did he manage to get through, but he also inspired his fellow prisoners to be able to get through. And there's another guy in there who I'm sure most of you will have heard of, Senator John McCain, the US Senator who died last year. And John McCain went on record saying that if Jim Stockdale had not been in the Hanoi Hilton, I would not have survived, and many of my friends would not have survived. We owe our lives to Jim Stockdale. Now, Stockdale, when he was asked about his time in the Hilton, he was asked, did you ever lose hope, right? And here is what he says, and it's really quite telling. He said, I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted not only that I would get out, but also that I would prevail in the end and turn the experience into the defining event of my life, which in retrospect, I would not trade. Now, that's really quite interesting, is that not only did he never lose hope, which I think is important for us all now, and I'll talk about that later, why that hope and optimism is important, but he also decided he was going to turn it into the defining event of his life. And again, I'm going to loop into that later on. But when he was asked how he got through, he really said it was because of the teachings of the Stoic philosophers. So these are a bunch of ancient Greeks and Romans who were around 2,000 years ago. And he had studied particularly one philosopher called Epictetus. And when he was shot down, he said to himself, as he parachuted out of his aircraft, and as he was coming in to land on with his parachute, he saw the Viet Cong running in to capture him. And he said to himself, I'm now leaving my world, the world of technology, and I'm entering into the world of Epictetus. And he says it was really, it was a cauldron for testing Epictetus's doctrines. And that's what helped him to get through and to help the others get through. And basically, here's a really high level summary of Stoic philosophy. And particularly when it comes to eudaimonia. So for the Stoics, they said that happiness is a fool's game, chasing happiness. But they said we can all live a life of eudaimonia, which roughly translates from the ancient Greek as flourishing or fulfillment. And they said there's very clear ways to do this. There's 3 sides to the triangle. The first one is living with arete, which roughly translates as virtue or character. So it's living a virtuous life and actually living your characteristics, your values or your virtues. And so the Stoics, they said when you're faced with an immovable object, when you're faced with a challenge that you can't control, it is an opportunity to sharpen your character. It's an opportunity to practice some virtue. And again, I'll talk about that later on. Now, linked into that is their idea of taking responsibility. And for the Stoics, it's pretty key to take responsibility for your own thoughts, your own behaviors, your own actions, but also taking responsibility for the hand that fate deals you. So the Stoics said that bad stuff happens all the time and the universe just doesn't care. But being the victim and really complaining about your circumstances doesn't serve anybody. They said you need to embrace your circumstances, whatever they are, and take responsibility for your own hand. So not blaming anybody else, just saying it is what it is, and you take responsibility. Now, linked into that is about focusing on what you can control. And for the Stoics, and the key thing, Epictetus talked about everything in your life being in two zones, zone 1 and zone 2. And zone 1, he said, was the stuff that's within your will or within your power, or as we would say, that is within your control. And he said zone 1 contains things such as your belief systems, what you choose to be afraid of, what you choose to have as your desires, but also your thoughts, your behaviors, your actions, and how you choose to react to your circumstances. He said everything else is zone 2. Zone 2 contains things such as your reputation, what people think about you, what they say about you. The past and the future are very much in zone 2. And they said something like COVID-19. Now, a lot of people say to me, how would the Stoics know about COVID-19? Well, actually, when Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, when he was in power, there was a massive plague that went throughout the Roman Empire that decimated it. It was much, much worse than COVID-19. And actually, he applied these principles to help him get through those times. So the Stoics were very familiar with stuff like we are, and much, much worse than we are experiencing today. So I think their philosophy is really quite useful for us. So Marcus Aurelius, he said that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. So with that in mind and thinking on the stuff that we can control, this is really what this program is all about. And this is about giving you the information and the tools to be able to practice behaviors that will enhance your resilience, your physical health, and your mental health in the face of adversity. And so I'm going to go through this later on, but we've got a whole learn section that contains a whole heap of education around resilience. And my approach to resilience, I'm never going to tell people, particularly who've had shit drop in their lap like all of us have, I would never say that, you know, all you need to do is focus on 3 things that you're grateful for and everything will be fine, right? As some positive psychology people will tell you. I'm into the hardcore psychophysiology of resilience, and I'll go through a little bit of that. There's also a toolbox with a whole heap of workouts, mindfulness tools, mindset tools. There's a ritual board to help you to create those habits, which is key. We got leaderboards for gamification, and then we got a social feed, and we'll see how important that actually is as we go through. But the key part of it is really the rituals, and which are habits, healthy habits, and the ritual board, the way to remind you and to track this stuff and to tick it off. And I'm actually going to go through this is what your ritual board. If you've already logged in, you'll see your ritual board looks like this. And if you haven't logged in yet, this is what you're going to see. So these are the quest rituals, the resilience ones that are pretty key. And I'm going to go through the ones that are underlined right now in the next probably half hour, and then we'll do a quick tour of the app. So so for the first one, I just want to talk about sculpting your brain, and I use the analogy of a bonsai. If anybody's ever had a bonsai tree, I had several which I completely killed, but the whole point of a bonsai is that you put it in this pot, this small pot, to constrain its growth, and then you clip it, and you hang things off it to be able to shape the tree the way you want it, right? And so it's shaped by its external inputs, and that is pretty much like our brains, my brain, your brain, everybody's brain. And so there's an astrophysicist, a professor of theoretical physics called Amit Goswami, who is a super, super sharp cookie. He's also a philosopher. And he said something I'll never forget about the way we experience reality. He said, we do not perceive reality directly. We perceive reality through the mirror of memory. Now, what he means by that is that every experience that you have had shapes your brain, just like a bonsai. But we know that emotional experiences disproportionately shape your brain. They are encoded as memories, and they're also, they fire off and code these neural networks in our brain. And especially, it's the strong emotional experiences that you had when you were a kid. As your brain is growing, they disproportionately impact your brain. And that influences how you perceive reality, right? So our reality runs through this filter, this unique filter. Our view of reality runs through this unique filter that we all have, right? Now, typical Western approaches to psychology are the psychotherapy approaches. Lie down on the couch, let's talk about your childhood and how it screwed you up, and let's try and unwind all of that. There is another approach, which is that taken by Japanese psychology, particularly Morita therapy, acceptance commitment therapy, both of which my wife is practitioners in. That's acceptance commitment therapy is a form of CBT that's really, really successful for stress-induced illnesses, right, like depression and anxiety. And the other thing is stoicism. So all three of those are very similar in their approaches, right? And I'm going to give you a tool right now that's in the app, but we'll just kind of go through it a little bit, right? So everybody can relate to themselves, right? So this is you, normal you. Now, we're going to do a little thought experiment about characters in your head, right? You know, the little voices that are in your head. Yep. So I know lots of people have got a shitload of voices in their heads, but we're going to think about the two polarizing, the positive and negative one, right? So little thought experiment, and just you can pop into the either the chat or the questions, just put some comments in as we go, right? I think everybody here can relate to a version of them that's a little bit shit, right? Just pop in yes if you can relate to that version of you, and they're probably around a little bit more now, right? This is what I call your inner gremlin, right? And if anybody remembers the movie Gremlins, right? They just go in and wreck things, and they're just not productive, right? Or are not helpful. Now, the key thing, the difference between normal you and your inner gremlin, this is what I call the deficit, and it's really driven by this sort of stuff, right? So negative self-talk, right? Anybody have any negative self-talk? Have we got any humans on the call? But it's also overthinking, right? That overthinking vortex that drives you down. It's about worry and anxiety. It's about the victim mentality. Woe is me. You know, why have they done this? Why has this happened to my industry, my business? But it's also the self-criticism, right? That's the inner gremlin that goes, you're shit. You're not good enough. You're fat. You're ugly. You're not as good as that person, right? Or you're not a good husband. You're not a good wife. You're not a good mother. You're not a good son, whatever it may be, right? The key thing to understand is that your inner gremlin is a chameleon. It takes all of these different guises. Now, as I said earlier, the Western approach is to try to get rid of your inner gremlin. And these approaches, the ACT and the Japanese psychology and stoicism, actually say, no, let's not try to get rid of it. We recognize that it's there, that everybody has it. It's about whether you're choosing to pay attention to it. And when you pay attention to it, that's when it gets powered up, right? And we know that attention, when you pay attention to something, that those neural circuits become strengthened, right? And it's a way, it's called Hebbian learning in the brain. It's a way the brain learns. When you consistently pay attention, now it's very interesting. I did a podcast recently with a guy, Greg Kretsch, who runs Japanese psychology out of the State Toru Institute. And he talks about people who are anxious and depressed. They're not anxious and depressed 24/7. They're anxious and depressed when they pay attention to their anxious or depressive thoughts. And that's what makes it worse, is paying attention to it, right? Now, I'm not trivializing it. I'm not saying it's easy. It's certainly not easy. But the whole approach, and the approach the Stoics took, is that when you're struggling, is that you consult what they called your inner sage. And I love this concept. This is the version of you that's awesome, your best self, right? And the difference between normal you and awesome you is the gap. And we can close this gap through these sorts of things. So zonal thinking that I talked about earlier, thinking about focusing on the stuff that you can control, right? Regular gratitude, I'll talk about that in a little bit. Taking responsibility for the hand that you have been dealt, right? But it's really about positive action. And this is where all three of those things collide. They say it's taking positive action despite how you're feeling. So when you hear the inner gremlin just in your ear, whatever it might be, you say, thanks, gremlin. Thanks for that story that you're telling me. But it's not a helpful story, and it's not one that I'm going to choose to pay attention to. And despite the negativity, you still take positive action. this is where your inner sage comes in, creating the inner sage and mentally rehearsing it. And then there's a couple of questions you can ask yourself, which I'll get to in a second. But here is and there's the exercise that's in the app. I just want to quickly go over it. So you write down, you got to bring them to life. You got to bring these characters to life. What do they say first thing in the morning, right? It's the inner gremlin that generally says press snooze, right? But what do they say when they're faced with a challenge? Both of them. And then the key thing is writing down the character traits or virtues of each one, and particularly focusing on your inner sage. So what are your character strengths when you're at your best? And then the plus ones are thinking of people who you know and admire and respect. So say I worked with Joe for a number of years, and I might think, I really like the way that Joe is calm under pressure. I would like to have more of that trait. I'm going to write down in the character traits for my inner sage, is calm under pressure. I'm going to give myself a little superpower, right? And then they need a name. This is really, really critical to give them a name, and you'll see why in a second. And as I said, this is in the app. And if you've got kids, this is one of the coolest things you'll ever do with your kids. So this is my little guy, Oscar. This is 4 years ago. He was 6 at the time. And him and his sister created their inner gremlin seeds. And I said, go and draw them. And I recommend that you draw the characters. But they also did speech bubbles. I didn't ask them to do the speech bubbles. And here's the cool thing. That's why I wanted to show you. So Derek, who's Oscar's inner gremlin, is actually saying, I will crush the good ones and I will be the king of Oscar's head. How cool is that shit? Think about it. Because that's what happens, right? That's what happens in our head. That negative self-talk. And when it gets a hold, it becomes the king of your head and it crushes the good self-talk. If you choose to pay attention to it, right? That's the key thing in all of this, is paying attention to it. So my inner sage is called Jev, and he's named after these 3 guys. J for Jim Stockdale, E for Epictetus, D for Viktor Frankl. I read his book as a 17-year-old. It had a pretty profound effect on me. And Frankl was a psychiatrist at Vienna University in the Second World War. He was a professor, and he got captured by the Nazis. He was a Jew, and he got sent to Auschwitz. He said the only things that got him through Auschwitz were 2 things. Number one, his wife. He didn't know if his wife was alive or dead, and dearly wanted to see her again. But the second one, he said, that really helped him through his dark times was realizing that he needed to create some good. He needed to connect into something that was bigger than himself. So he rationalized. He said, as a psychiatrist, I have a skill set that no one else has, and that I'm probably the only one that can create some good out of this. And if I can create a new type of psychotherapy based on the horrors of what happened here. And that's what he started to do, create it in his head. And when he got out, when he survived and got out, he published his manuscript, Logotherapy. And it's now a highly successful treatment for anxiety and depression. And one of the key tenets of logotherapy, or the key tenet, he said, is that he realized in Auschwitz, man is capable of terrible things to fellow man, particularly in times of war. They can put you through immense pain and suffering. They can take away all of your belongings, all of your dignity, all your pride, even all of your loved ones. He said, man can take from you everything but one thing. And he called it the last of human freedoms. Your ability to choose how you react to your circumstances, to choose your own attitude, to choose your own way. And you can see it's very linked in with the thinking of the Stoic philosophers. And so, as I said, my sage is called Jev, and I would put it to you that if we think about these 3 guys and we think about the inner sage and the inner gremlin, all 3 of these guys would be very supportive of the idea that every day we get to choose who's in control. You get to choose when you wake up. If you spend just a couple of minutes, as we recommend that you do, just thinking about what version of you do you want to bring into the world today. Do you want to bring your shitty inner gremlin to have a negative impact on those around you? Or is it going to be your inner sage? And when you're faced with a challenge, it's about using that little gap between stimulus and response, what Frankl referred to as the space. And it's in the space that you get to choose how you react, right? And that is where there's a couple of questions that come in really handy. So one that I ask myself is, what would Jev do right now, right? And when, you know, the world was falling around, my business was falling apart, and I'm thinking, fuck, woe is me. I thought, what would Jev do right now? Well, he wouldn't sit and feel sorry for himself. He would try to control his own destiny. And so he would pivot into the online space, but he would also look out rather than look in. We'd start to think, well, what help can I be to my fellow Australians, rather than just thinking about himself, right? The other thing that you can do, once you've written down those characteristics, the other awesome question to ask yourself is, what actions do I need to take now to represent those characteristics, or to live out those characteristics, right? And so that's that whole acceptance commitment therapy, Marita therapy approach of focusing in on positive actions, right? When you link it to a character, this is something called self-distancing, which is a technique that's cognitive technique that's highly recognized as being very, very useful in depression, anxiety, PTSD, all of these things, right? And we wrapped it up around these characters, and it's something that your kids can do that really is very, very useful. So that's the brain sculpting bit. Then the next thing I want to talk about is exercise, and just how fundamental it is, particularly in stressful times. And if you are so stressed that you think, I don't have the time or the energy to exercise, that is absolutely the time that you must do it. Like, this is a non-negotiable. I can now say, and without a shadow of a doubt, that if you do not currently engage in regular physical activity, particularly vigorous stuff, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that your brain is functioning optimally. Now, most of you guys will be familiar with the idea that exercise improves your mood, right? And if I was to ask you, why does it do that? Most people would say endorphins, right? Endorphins, they're the kind of sexy chemicals that get all the plaudits. I tell you, if I was a monoamine, you look down in the bottom left here, if I was a monoamine, I'd be very pissed off, because endorphins are getting all the credits, but monoamines do a lot of the heavy lifting. We know your monoamines are serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline. And we know that when you exercise, you enhance them. So serotonin is important for mood and for sleep. Dopamine is important for pleasure, for reward, but also motivation and goal-directed behavior. And then noradrenaline is important for mood as well, and focus. And actually, if you look at the two major classes of antidepressant drugs, they're called SSRIs and SNRIs. They stand for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. What they do is they work on those two neurotransmitters, and they make them more available, the stuff that you produce. But exercise boosts your production, which is a more effective strategy, which is why randomized control trials, and when they do a meta-analysis and pull all the data together, it shows that exercise beats antidepressant medication hands down for both minor and major depression, and also for anxiety as well. So it's critical. And I want to bring you back to what Professor Frank Booth said, and I talked about the current human genome requires and expects us to be highly physically active for normal functioning. Most people get that exercise boosts your mood, but they don't understand that if you're not highly active, you're actually depriving your brain of the neurochemicals that it needs to function normally, which is one of the reasons why I think we've got such high rates of mental health issues, because we don't move anywhere near as much as our ancestors. You know, if you got any kind of a tracking device, Fitbit, Apple Watch, Job, Garmin, whatever, most people aspire to do 10,000 steps a day. The Amish community, who live a traditional lifestyle, females do about 15,000, males about 18,000. Hunter-gatherers, the Hazda in Kenya, do between 18 and 22,000 steps, yet we aspire to do less, that are around half of what our ancestors did. So now if you're trying, and it's pretty hard to get 18 to 22,000 steps a day, so my recommendations are try to get a minimum of 10,000 steps, but then you've got to do more vigorous exercise, right? Because that gives you the best bang for your buck. And we know that exercise controls your gene expression. I'm not talking walking here. I'm talking getting out of breath and lifting heavy shit, right? And that's what I mean is planned exercise. And I've talked to thousands, if not tens of thousands of corporates over the years. And lots of people have said to me, I don't like exercise because it's uncomfortable. It's supposed to be bloody uncomfortable. That is why it is good for you. In fact, the only reason it's good for you is because when we exercise, it releases these things called stress response genes. These are magical proteins called heat shock proteins that get inside your cells and repair the damage. But then what they do is really critical. They trigger another wave of gene expression, metabolic priority genes, that just make your ecosystem function well. Your body and your brain, right? And then there's a third wave of gene expression called your mitochondrial enzyme genes. And when you get damaged mitochondria, that's when you get premature aging and disease. And actually exercise helps to repair that damaged mitochondria. And high intensity interval training can actually create what's called mitochondrial biogenesis, which is a big word for brand spanking new batteries, right? This is why exercise has been called the most successful anti-aging strategy that we currently know of. So I think that exercise is obviously pretty compelling from a scientific perspective. So now let me try something a little bit left field, which is cold showers. So just interested to see who does regular cold showers. Just pop it in if you do. If you don't, go no way, right? Stick it in the chat or the questions, whatever you're using. But let me talk to you about the science and what it says. So here was a randomized control trial. This is the best form of evidence that randomly split people into two groups and then asked half of them to have a 30-second minimum cold shower at the end of their normal shower for a year. And they measured their health, their sickness, their absenteeism of both groups at the start, 6 months down the track and 12 months down the track. And at the end of the year, the people who had the regular cold showers had a 30% reduction in sickness and absenteeism. Now that is off the charts crazy successful for a health intervention. We also know that cold showers are a potential treatment for depression. This was highlighted back in 2008. And just in the last couple of months, there's been a number of case reports in the British Medical Journal, documented cases of people under doctor supervision who've been using cold water to cure their depression, right? So we can see that this is actually happening. So again, let me take you and tell you a little story and introduce you back to Oscar. And he's looking like this because he's in a shower and he's in two things. Number one, he's in a cold shower, but two, and we were just back from Bali, right? He doesn't normally wear that shit in his hair, right? And it was middle of winter. The reason he's in a cold shower is because we got back from Bali. I read the research and I thought, shit, this is really compelling. I need to start running experiments, right? And it's not what you think. I didn't use Oscar as my subject. I used myself. So I jumped into the shower that day and I thought, right, what did they say? They said minimum 30 seconds. So I was about to turn it to cold. And this little voice came in my head and went, it's your first one. It's winter. You don't have to do 30 seconds. Just do 20. Right, that little gremlin, and I'm rather embarrassed to say that I gave in to my gremlin, and I said, right, it's my first one, 20 seconds, and I turned it to cold just as Oscar happened to walk into the bathroom, right? So picture the scene, I'm in the shower, and Oscar walks into the bathroom, and I'm in there going, and he's kind of looking at me going, what are you doing, Dad? And I'm like, I'm having a cold shower, buddy. And he says, what are you doing that for? And I couldn't really think of it, and I went, because it makes you tough, buddy. And he went, really? And I'm like, yep. And I've just finished. And he's still standing there. He's looking at me. And he said, how long did you do, Dad? I said, I did 20 seconds, mate. And he went, get out. I'm going to kick your ass, right? So when he got, this is him about 3 seconds. And I have my phone timing myself. And I thought, I know what's going to happen here. So that's about 3 seconds in. And then this is Oscar 30 seconds into his freezing cold shower, right? And doing his box breathing, which is a technique that I taught him but didn't think to use, and he just kicked straight in. Look at that focus. And so we got the 30 seconds, and I said, yeah, that's it, 30 seconds. And he stopped the shower, and he walked out of the shower like this. Loser. So I was completely humiliated by my 7-year-old at the time. But here is what happens. This is why we should all be doing regular cold showers. So the first thing that happens is norepinephrine is released in your brain. Remember that feel-good chemical? Which is why this can help combat depression. The other thing, and just also lift your mood, like start the day by lifting your mood. And the other thing, those magical proteins that are released during exercise are also released with cold water exposure. And the third system, the third thing that happens is your immune system gets upregulated, right? So it becomes improved. Anybody fancy a more improved immune system right now? And so that's the biology behind it, but the psychology is also really important. So for me, it's about grit, developing grit. It's about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And actually, one thing that really caused me to just lock it in as a daily habit was reading about. In fact, here, So I think you guys can probably see that. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So this is the diary of a Roman emperor, right? He's called the last great emperor of Rome. Anybody who's seen the movie The Gladiator, he's at the start of it, the emperor at the start. And Marcus kept the diary and never meant anybody to read it. It was just his own personal journal. And when he died, somebody found it and they actually published his diary, and it's got translated into a whole heap of languages. And I was reading through the book, and I came across a passage where Marcus says to himself that he should be engaging in regular cold water bathing and regular vigorous exercise, because he says they both develop character. And it is this character that you will need to face challenges in your life. So 2,000 years ago, you have the Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man on the planet, telling himself to have regular cold baths and regular vigorous activity so that he can strengthen his character and help him to face challenges. He's talking about resilience training 2,000 years ago, which is pretty cool. So if this shit's good enough for a Roman emperor, I think it's good enough for me, and it's good enough for you. So just interested in the poll, stick it in the poll about who are in the chat about who's going to have that cold shower, and just tick off this ritual regularly. Okay, so that is the cold shower stuff. The next thing I want to talk about is the breathing, which is really, really important to do in your cold shower and any time that you are feeling stressed. So as I said earlier on, Connie, my wife is a coach and works with a number of people with anxiety, overthinkers, and teaching them this breath work. And she teaches some other parts of breath work. For many people has just changed their lives. And it's really, it's about box breathing is a technique used by US Special Forces soldiers when they're on patrol to control their stress and put their brains in an optimal state. Now, if anybody knows anything about Special Forces soldiers, they don't do fluffy bullshit, right? They just don't. They do stuff that has been demonstrated to give them a performance edge. So box breathing, you just breathe in for 4 or 5, you hold for 4 or 5, you breathe out for 4 or 5, and you hold for 4 or 5. And it's only taken us about 3,000 years, us scientists, to catch up with the knowledge of yogis. That breathing like this positively affects your heart and your brain. And we know it's through the vagus nerve, right? And when we breathe, we reduce our heart rate, we reduce our blood pressure when we breathe like this, and we take our brain out of a stress state. It's about controlling your physiology. So anybody who, whenever they're stressed or having anxious thoughts, and using your box breathing, if you want to get to sleep, if your kids are struggling to get to sleep, take some box. Teaching your kids how to breathe, hugely, hugely important. So that's the box breathing, and there's a whole heap of guided ones in the actual app. Now the next thing I want to talk about, I kind of bumped into this 28 years ago, into the concept of gratitude, and I had taken a year off university. Sorry about that. I was traveling around the world, and I spent 3 months in India, and back in 1992. And back in 1992, India was a pretty bonkers place, right? And there was a guy who came up to me one day. He was in this rickety homemade go-kart, and he came up and he was begging, and I looked down, and the guy had leprosy. His nose was eaten away, his ear was eaten away, and I looked down at his feet, and he had elephantitis. And it hit me pretty hard, and I gave him some money, and off he went. And as he went off, I stood there and I was watching him, and I said to myself, never, ever forget this guy, ever. And the next time you're feeling sorry for yourself, just remember this guy. Because what has he ever done to deserve leprosy and elephantitis when you are perfectly healthy? So be grateful. And it's something I've done a gratitude ritual ever since. And actually, it was really helpful with this whole COVID-19. And I like to use this with a technique that the Stoics talked about, negative visualization, which is visualizing negative things that could happen so that you can prepare yourself for them. And so when this happened, me and my wife Connie sat down and we said, right, well, let's do some negative visualization. What do we think is the worst realistic thing that would happen? We said, well, if we catch it, we're both healthy. We know how to get a really healthy immune system, so we'll probably be fine. But the worst thing that could happen to us, either parents or our business completely collapses and we end up losing our house. And we thought, well, like if we end up losing our house, at least our kids don't have bone cancer. So that's the stuff that we can be grateful for, right? And it's in those times, those hard times, is remembering the stuff that we are grateful for and all the amazing things that we have can actually help us through hard times. And the research shows that people who regularly practice gratitude, you know, they experience all of this stuff, and which is a pretty impressive list. I think you would agree. So that's gratitude, and that takes me to our next one, which the last one I want to talk about before I quickly show you the app. And this is about the tap code. So this is about the Hanoi Hilton prison camp, and here it is. And here is a photograph of some of the actual prisoners in that prison camp. And it was, as I said earlier, it was horrendous. But the reason that these guys got through, there's a guy called Dennis Charney, who's a neuropsychiatrist at Mount Sinai School of Medicine, and he interviewed every single one of those prisoners of war that were in the Hanoi Hilton. And he said they all told him that it was around Stockdale's teachings, and Stockdale created a mission for them: return with honor. He realized the importance of that mission, but also created a code of values or virtues that they would all live by. And here's what it was: it was unity, the power of we. Stockdale said, gentlemen, we will likely be here for years. This will be horrendous, more horrendous than most of us think. Nobody will get through this alone. No one. The only way we will get through this is if we are united. So there was the power of we. He said everybody needs to be included. There are to be no little splinter groups. We all need to be together. It's also about brutal honesty, first with yourself, then with everyone else. And he said everybody's going to screw up in here, and particularly in the stress, but everybody deserves a second chance. And it was those things that got them through. And they also, a few years in, they got word that the Viet Cong were going to put them in solitary confinement to try and break them. And so they created this thing called the tap code and taught it to everybody. And Stockdale said, he said, get on. It was a way that they could tap on the walls and communicate with each other, or tap through the pipes or whatever. And Stockdale said, get on the wall, learn the tap code and share information. Help each other, support each other, remind each other of the mission and each prisoner of war's role in that mission. Now, Dennis Charney said that when he interviewed them, he said lifelong friendships were struck up in that prison camp between people who'd never met each other because they tapped on the walls. They were in the cell next to each other, the cell across the way, and they helped each other through their darkest times. And Stockdale said, if your brother in the next cell is taken away and tortured, when he comes back, you get on the wall, you tap him, you tell him that you love him. If he says that he has betrayed us because he's given secrets to the enemy, you tell him you've done worse. You be there for him, right? That was the whole getting on the wall, the tap code stuff. And let's talk about quickly the evidence. We know that being altruistic, being interested in others, improves your mental health. And we know the single biggest predictor is whether a Vietnam veteran got PTSD was not having or not using a social support network. Same has been repeated in Iraq and Afghanistan. The people who use their networks, who talk about how they're feeling and their struggles, they are the people who get a lot less PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And we know that when you have a genuine "are you okay" conversation with someone, oxytocin and vasopressin are released in both people's brains. Now, oxytocin is the hormone of love and trust. Vasopressin is the hormone of social bonding, but they are both very potent anti-stress hormones. So this is how this stuff actually works, and it's hugely, hugely important, and particularly now. And so I would remind you, and this is really good for us all, right? And the wall is metaphorical here, obviously, but get on the wall, learn the tap code and share information, help each other, support each other, and remind each other of the mission and each prisoner of war's role in that mission. So about the mission was hugely important for these guys. And I want you to think about, what's your mission right now in this COVID-19, in all the shitstorm that's happening and the shit that's going down with your business, and if you're in lockdown, you know, all the negative impact, but what's your legacy going to be? So another little thought experiment just before we look at the app is I want you to project into the future, and you're 85 years old or whatever, 80, 90, whatever. You've got your grandparents or your great-grandparents are sitting on your knee, and you're having a conversation with them about what is undoubtedly going to be the defining event of our lifetime, which is COVID-19. What are you going to say that you did in COVID-19? Are you one of those people that fell apart, that got fat and out of shape? Or are you one of those people that actually used it as an opportunity to sharpen your character or to practice some virtue? Or did you look out and help others and really band in with the community? Or did you look inward? I really want you to think about what your legacy might be. And something that I find very helpful is just having a reminder every day. And my bathroom mirror, there's two things written on it. One is memento mori. I got that from Marcus Aurelius, right? He said, remember that you can die at any time. At any point, you can leave this earth. And he did it not to be morose, but to remind himself that life was just an amazing gift. And to wake up every morning, it's just immensely grateful to be alive. And to use that thought that you could die at any moment to actually drive your actions and your behaviors that day. And linked into that is carpe punctum. You've all heard of carpe diem, which is about seizing the day, but carpe punctum, it's much easier to seize moments. And that's what carpe punctum is about. It's about seizing those little moments to actually be your sage, to bring your best self to the fore, whether it's about just confronting challenges or helping others or whatever it might be. So guys, here are some links. Just before I show you the app, we will send you out some stuff. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, reach out to me on Instagram. Anybody wants some extra coaching if they're struggling or know anybody who's struggling. Carly's a great coach, particularly around that whole mindset stuff. We will send you out, as Joe said, I'm going to send you out an email in a little bit that's going to talk about all the things that we need to do. But right now, what I want to do is just switch and give you a quick little 5-minute tour through the app. And stop sharing. So let me just show you a different screen. So.
And Paul, while you're bringing that up, a question.
Yes.
When you have your 30-second cold shower, I've got a question from Nina here. Can you then flick it to warm water, or is that cheating?
That is cheating. And the reason being is that you want, at the end of that at the cold, that's what you want to finish on, because you want the big boost of noradrenaline to be happening right there. And if you turn it to warm, then it's going to go, right? So the key thing is just do your box breathing, get through it, because actually at the end of the cold, that's when you get the rush of noradrenaline and you actually feel pretty fabulous, right? So that's the key thing. Remember to do your box breathing because it's critical. So Joe, can you just confirm you can see my app on the screen?
Yeah.
Right. So guys, this is the website. So just understanding you can either use the phone or the website. I recommend your default is the phone because it's got a couple of advantages over the website, but it's just app.mindbodybrain.com.au, same login details, right? So here's your ritual board. Now there's a couple of things to highlight. Every time you take something off, I want you to look at the leaderboard points, right? So here, I had my cold shower earlier on, so I'm going to tick that, and you'll see that I've got an extra 20 points, right? So there are certain what we call focus rituals every week where you get extra points for them. So you can see yourself, your own leaderboard. You can flick it over to team. This is a different challenge that I'm in with other people. You get a little notification when you get rituals. So you can see your team. You can actually click on the team. Sorry, it's going to be a bit slow here just because I'm broadcasting. And then you can see who else is going. And you can see my 3 teammates here neither could kick up the arse this week quite clearly. But this is where team captains can look and see people who aren't really and contribute and just get around them. You know, send a little message to them. Say, hey guys, let's get into it. And the learn section, there's a whole heap of videos in here about all the different elements that I think add up to resilience, right? The key things I wanted you to focus on this week, the action in your life. That's really about the ritual board and taking action and the importance of that. And if you want to, you can do a deep dive into that stress overview and really go into the whole neurobiology and physiology of stress in that. But we'll sort of guide you through those over the next 4 weeks. And you can just sort of dig out. Every time you watch a video, for the first time you watch it, you're going to get points as well, right? So there's a number of ways you can get points, and you will have been emailed those as well, right? How you get points. And you also, sorry, if you click on quests, oh shit, every time I do this, I've managed to zoom in to my, to my bloody computer. And look at me, I'm like a friggin' 90-year-old. Right. So if you go and you click on the Resilient Mind quest, and you'll see in week 1, it tells you how you can earn points, right? And then you can flick through. Week 2, it's going to change. This one I'm actually in week 4 here. So you just flick through the weeks and you'll see what the focus ritual is, and also how you can earn points that week, right? So that's a little bit of intel to get your team up the leaderboard. And the toolbox. So workouts, you click on this. There's a whole heap of workouts, level 1 to 5, all body weight. Level 1 is for 55-year-old overweight Mr. and Mrs. Nurkin Firkin, right? Who haven't exercised in ages. Level 5, even the fittest people will get their ass smashed in 8 minutes on level 5, right? So it's all body weight stuff. You can preview the exercises, then you press start. This is where the app is better, because you just sit it in the corner of the room and it plays the exercise you're supposed to be doing, gives you a countdown, you can add your music to it, and then it'll play the next exercise when you're recovering, right? So the other things, mindfulness. So here's where the box breathing is. So you can see all those different box breathing. You just click on it, and there's a little guided thing. I'll not actually play it here, but it's a sort of a guided breathing meditation. And then we have other meditations. This is Carly's stuff, just around people who've got these busy heads or just want to relax. These are beautiful guided meditations. The other things in the toolbox, we've got mindset tools. These are the things, the Sage and Gremlin exercises here. You've got a whole journal that has a number of all those things. You can just download the journal and print it out. And we'll add more to this over time. There's hundreds of recipes. Click on the resources, and this is an important page, recommended books and videos. But also this is how you connect, how to connect to Tracker, and there's the app user guide. So you can click on this, and if you can't remember how to do anything, connect your device so as it can bring in your steps. Or you can connect your phone, right? If your phone's in your pocket, that's actually a step tracker as well. Right? How to update your profile, all of that. Just while we're on profile, it's on the website, it's in the top right, and in the app, it's the little 3 bars in the top left. So you click on that, or in the app, you just put your finger on the screen and drag it across to the right, and then you can go to settings, right? And in the settings, and this is where you can upload a picture for yourself. You can change your name if you want, just to confuse the shit out of people. And you can dictate, when you get push notifications and that sort of stuff. We'll send you 1 push notification a day. Other thing, you can get in with teams. So anybody who comes in who's not a member of the team, if they're just coming in with the access code, they can actually see a team and they can send a request to the leader to join. When the team is full, then it's kind of full. There's not much we can do about it. But this is where the leader can go in and change the team name, right? You just edit it. You can choose an avatar, just upload a little image for the avatar, and you can update the team. And then your members, this is where you can go in and you can actually delete members. If you don't want to be a team leader, you can actually opt out, but you have to send a leader request to somebody else. So for me to opt out as team leader, I have to send a leader request. But you can also delete individuals who have said, I don't want to use it anymore, right? So but the first point is to encourage them. Now, the key thing around this is that if you sent to Joe and you were only 2 or 3 people, we've had to merge it into teams, right? The minimum team size in the app is 4. So Joe might have changed your name. You might think, I don't recognize this game and I don't recognize those people. That's why, right? So don't be going in and deleting strangers out of your team, because they are important team members, right? So that, I think, the last thing I want to say on your ritual board, and this is where the app is actually has an advantage over the website, is that when you go onto your ritual board, you can just click on the name of any one of those. Say you want to really get into box breathing. You just click on the name. It's a little bit slow to load because I'm broadcasting. And then you can set reminders every day, and you can set multiple times, right? You can say, right, I want to have 8 o'clock in the morning, and I also want to do 8 o'clock in the evening. I want to do my box breathing. And you save it, and then in the app, it's going to send you a little pop-up notification to remind you to do it. I highly recommend you do that. Reason being is that you'll have the best of intentions of going through the program, and you'll just forget because there's a lot of shit going on, right? And that just little pop-up is that little reminder, and just to jump back into the app and to use the app. And now the key thing on this is that I have seen consistently that when people use the app, that it actually improves their mental health. And I've got that data for a number of different organizations. And in fact, I might just see if I can share my screen again, just to show you some data on it. But the key thing is actually using the program. So with your team members, just get around your team members, encourage each other to use it, because all of this stuff is all heavily grounded in science. And if you do those rituals consistently, and you know, do the exercise, do all of that other stuff, it will definitely have a positive impact on your mental health and your resilience, right? That is really the key thing. And I'll just quickly show you some results. So as you know, I'm not bullshitting you. And Joe, just confirm you can now see the Prezi again?
Yes, we can. And then I do have some members asking some questions that I'll address before we finish up.
Yeah. Okay. So here, these guys just finished this morning, right? Defense Health, bunch of people in Melbourne, and you can see, let me just scroll in so you can see it a bit better. So at the start, you know, you look at their well-being, you know, 50% either had likely low mental well-being or a likely mental health issue, and at the end of 4 weeks, dropped to 10%, right? Which is pretty amazing. They had 8% had likely high, that went to 48. So that's a six-fold increase over 4 weeks. And then resilience, which most researchers will tell you is hard to move the needle on, and 22% had low resilience at the start and only 2 at the end. 6% at high, and that quadrupled to 24%, right? And I could show you the similar results for all of the companies that have used the app. So I guess what I'm saying is this shit works if you use it, right? It's just like going to the physio. The physio will give you exercises that will absolutely sort your injury out if you do the shit, right? If you just go to the physio and then don't follow up, no shit's going to change. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
That's me off my podium, off the soapbox. What's the question?
No, look, Paul, that was like absolutely fantastic. And each and every time I listen to you, I pick up something new and different to apply. So loving it. Now, a couple of things to just a bit of housekeeping to help people. Firstly, it was that we needed to have teams a minimum size of 4 and a maximum size of 12. So if you sent me in a team that was less than 4 people, don't feel the need to email me and say it's a mistake, I'm in a team with other people. It's not a mistake. You'll put in a team with other people in the industry so that you'd be in a team of around 12 people. So it's not a mistake. Embrace being with other people. And as Paul just showed us, if you're a leader and you don't want to be a leader in that team, you can go in and you can allocate that leadership to someone else. If you have a team member that you've nominated to do the program and they've decided they don't want to do it, you also have complete control of that. So with their permission, just go in and delete them out. And if you want to add team members, then I'm going to give you a code that you can give to the individual and get them to sign up for themselves. Don't email me because I can't actually add them. So this is the code that you need. It's after 456. So I've actually put in the chat box the website URL, which is app.mindbodybrain.com.au. Your individual, your colleague can go to that website and put in that code. They can register and put in the code after 456 and then register for the program. Other questions? If you this program is accessible via the desktop and a mobile app. So you have one user profile and you can log in via the app or the desktop and interchange between the two. None is better than the other. I guess both have slightly different features, but the amazing thing about the app is it's with you all the time, and it can also become your pocket guide. So instead of scrolling through social media over night time, how about you sit in and listen to one of the educational videos? What else is there? As we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, some of your colleagues may not have had time to join today. So we are recording the webinar and it will be available on the AFTR website. I have also put the link where that will be uploaded by 5 o'clock today. That's in the chat box. And what else will I say about that?
So I'll just chime in while you're thinking about it. So if anybody wants to invite a family or friend member, you can do it in the app. There seems to be an issue with it at the minute, which I'm having the techies look at, but you can just give them the same access code. But when they come in, they just select friends or family, right? So just do that, and they'll go and they'll be able to see everything that you can see. So that's the best way to add those guys. Now, if you were, and there's a couple of things, if you say, well, I haven't got access, if you had registered before the deadline last week and Joe had you in the sheet, you're already in the system, right? So if you don't have an email, if you can't find it, just go in, use the same email that you registered with and log in. Don't register, log in and click on forgot password, right? Now, if you're using the access code, you need to go in and register, right? So if you haven't been pre-registered before this week, you'll use the access code. If you have been pre-registered and put into a team by us, then you need to go in and log in. And the best way, if you don't have a password, just click on forgot password. It'll send you a link to reset it, and you're in the system. You're off and running.
Yeah, that's great. So just to again reiterate, the access code is AFTR456. And Paul is sorting out the friends and family invite component of the app. The app name is Resilient Mind. So if you go to the App Store and search Resilient Mind, you'll be able to download the app. Please also check your junk box. I've had a couple of people say they didn't get the link this morning and it was actually sitting in their junk box. And in that email, there's a couple of user guides on actually how to download and use the app. So definitely search for that. And if you check the junk box and it's not there, then I actually suspect there's quite a few firewalls that are preventing the email getting through. So in that case, just go straight to the website and log in that way.
Yeah, and just click on forgot password if you can't see it. And if it still doesn't come, it might be a firewall issue. So if you've tried that and you try the access code and nothing works, then just let us know and I'll reset your password in the back end. But we don't want 150 emails all going there.
I've got a lot of emails from you guys, so bear with me. Paul and I are going to compile a generic email with instructions that we're going to just send out to people that'll cover off a lot of the Q&As that have been coming in. So we will get to you. Was there anything else to share?
Just on if people want, I'm happy to run another webinar over the coming weeks. I can do a deep dive on nutrition. I can do a deep dive on the immune system. I can actually combine them both. So if you would like me to run another one, just put yes in there. Just do it now and we'll see if there's enough requests for it, then we'll do it. If you've had enough of my bloody dulcet tones, then don't type anything in.
I'm getting overwhelmed with yeses. I have a question here. Resilient Mind. I just had a question here about the app. So you're looking for Resilient Mind, and it's Paul's business symbol that you're looking for.
And it's somebody said is in Android or download. It says KidTech. Yeah, it's KidTech. They're the developers, but it's the Resilient Mind app. So you'll see it in both Google Play and in the App Store. It's Resilient Mind, but the developer of the app is KidTech Party Limited.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That answers Sharon's question. So perfect.
And again, someone's asked, how do you edit your name if incorrectly spelled? You just go into the settings and you can change your profile name there.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, once you're in, guys, you've got complete control of uploading a photo, changing your name, changing your password. And, you know, I spent some time looking at it this morning, and it's definitely going to take some time for us to get our head around. It's a really, like, meaty app. So definitely spend some time navigating through that and getting familiar with it, because you can even change the key elements on your things on your ritual board, can't you, Paul?
Yeah, you can. You can go into the add rituals and add other rituals. So you can put in personal rituals, like you want to walk the dog. Just put that in as a personal ritual and set reminders, right?
Yeah. So just again, if you didn't receive the email this morning, it may be a technical glitch or it may be in your junk box. So go to the app.mindbodybrain.com.au website. And actually, I might just share my screen quickly.
Yeah, so they can either do that or in the app, Joe, and just go log in and put your email in and press forgot password.
Yeah, great. Okay.
And only then, if it says your account is not recognized or the email doesn't exist, only then will we know that there's a problem with your email address. So you can then let us know and we can edit the email address in the back end.
Okay. Paul, can you see my screen with the website? Yeah. So, guys, I just want to highlight that this is the URL. It's app.mindbodybrain.com.au. Then on the right-hand side, you'll go to login. So everybody that did send me their team or their email to register, your email is in the back end. So if you didn't get the email this morning, simply type in your email address and go forgot your password, and you'll get an email in your inbox to reset that password. Yeah. If for some reason it says, you know, can't find that email address, then go and try the register option, which is sitting next to the login here on the top right, and put in your access code AFTA456 and register that way.
Awesome. Can I hire you, Joe?
Clearer. Hopefully that's clearer.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. But guys, it's really fantastic. Paul, thank you so much for your time today, and I will definitely connect with you about pulling out more of your knowledge for our members and having some follow-up webinars on some of those different topics that you mentioned.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys. Carpe punctum. Go get shit done.
Love it. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to the challenge. Super excited to have be doing this challenge with you. So, all right. Bye now.
Cheers. See ya.